Oh my gosh. Excuse me. I was just figuring out all the mysteries in Chasing Vermeer. I believe you're here today for Chasing Vermeer, Chapter 11, The Nightmare. At 7:30 on the morning of November 5, Calder was hunting for his sneakers. Petra was looking under the living room sofa for her hairbrush. Both reached their kitchens at the same time. In the Palais house, Calder's parents were pouring juice, pulling out cold cereal boxes, and talking. Calder caught the words tragic, shocking. What's the matter? He asked. In Petra's kitchen, her mom was making cheese sandwiches and talking to her dad. Petra heard her mother say, "How could a thing like this happen? I mean, whose fault is it?" Petra read the headlines. On the front page of the Chicago Tribune, in giant letters, were the words, "Vermeer vanishes. Irreplaceable treasure disappears between Chicago and Washington." Petra sat heavily on the kitchen chair and began to read. Gulp. This sounds terrible, guys. A 1665 Vermeer painting entitled A Lady Riding was stolen this past weekend when in transit between the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C., and the Institute of Art of Chicago. The painting was to be the centerpiece of an exhibit to open next week at the Art Institute. A Lady Riding is, according to curators at the National Gallery, of absolutely incalculable worth. One of the 35 known works by Dutch artist Johannes Vermeer. It is, without a doubt, one of the most valuable paintings to have been stolen in the 20th century. In an emotional telephone interview, N.B. Jones, the curator in charge of arranging the loan, said, "This is every museum's nightmare. This is an exquisite and fragile painting that needs to be kept in certain atmospheric conditions. It is easily worth millions of dollars. But it could never be sold. Could never be sold on the black market. It must have been targeted for theft by an individual collector. This is a tragedy of indescribable proportions." According to sources at the Art Institute, the painting arrived with armed guards late yesterday afternoon, when it was unpacked with great excitement by a group of conservators and curators. The case was found to be empty. A printed note was taped to the packing materials. It read, "You will come to agree with me." Every attendant and armed guard who was near the painting from the time it left Washington has been identified, and they're being held for questioning. Oh my goodness, guys. The painting has been stolen. We knew it. If only we had listened to Rico. Petra could hardly breathe. She had to find Calder. Calder listened to his parents read parts of the article aloud. I knew it, he muttered to himself. "What's that, Calder? It's upsetting, isn't it?" Calder's dad appeared at him over the paper. As Calder ran down the hall, he heard his father remarking to his mother, "Must have spelling today." Calder was down the steps in one leap and running toward Petra's house. He arrived just as she stepped out. One look at each other and both knew it wasn't necessary to break the news. They sat down on the curb at the end of Petra's walk. "We knew it, right? We knew ahead of time," Calder began fiercely. "Yeah, but we didn't really know." Petra's voice was strangled sounding. "Besides, who would have paid any attention to two kids talking about what sounds like a few coincidences? There's no question now that there's something really creepy going on here, and that we're mixed up in it." Calder looked at Petra directly for the first time. "I mean, how could we just stumble on this stuff?" Petra didn't disagree. "It seems nutty to say, but I think the Vermeer woman is depending on us, kind of like she's been waiting for us to catch up." They were both silent for a moment. Calder stood up. "So what do we do now?" "What Charles Fort would do. Pay attention and keep our heads." And as you can see, there are 45 pentominoes and 19 frogs in this picture. Find them all. Ooh, a little bit of musical accompaniment. Miss Hussey turned up at school that morning with her arm in a sling, like a cast almost. She explained that the lights had gone out in her house the night before and that she had fallen. What seemed intriguing just a couple days ago suddenly felt sinister to both Calder and Petra. Petra's dream painting had been stolen. Petra's dad was acting weird. Calder was worried about Tommy, and now Miss Hussey was hurt. Petra and Calder looked at each other, silently running through all the things that were going wrong. Who or what would be next? Miss Hussey had the newspaper under her arm, and the first thing she did was read aloud the article about the Vermeer painting. This started a discussion about art theft and about how thieves sometimes cut the canvases out of frames. Miss Hussey told them about a theft in 1990 at the Isabel Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. Thieves had dressed as police and gotten the night security guards to let them in. Then they tied up the guards, turned off the alarms, and stole at least 10 paintings, including a Vermeer and a Rembrandt. Those paintings were still missing. She told them a number of other stories about art thefts, about some of the plottings ingenious and some a mess. We just have to hope, Miss Hussey said, that this thief is not a professional. You mean that he'll do something stupid? Asked Calder. Something that will give him away? Or that he or she will crack under the strain of it all, she said, her voice sounding tired. I'm giving you a free work time this morning. I don't feel very well. Most of the class whispered happily or read something to forget about the Vermeer. All day, a book with a full-page reproduction of the lady was propped up against the blackboard. Calder walked by it and was surprised to realize that it was the same book they'd seen Miss Hussey pay for at Powell's a couple weeks ago. The word Calder had seen on the cover hadn't been never. It had been part of Netherlandish painting. When he told Petra, she got very quiet. Another coincidence, she said, her voice barely audible. I didn't like the way Miss Hussey said that thing about cracking under the strain. She looks like she's cracking. I think we should tell her what we've been studying, that we've been studying Vermeer too. It might cheer her up, Calder suggested. Petra thought for a moment. No, she said slowly, and I'm not sure why. I think she's in some kind of trouble, and I don't want her to think we've noticed. Otherwise, we won't be able to help. Right, said Calder. She wouldn't want us to get hurt, too. Suddenly he remembered the pentomino Denise had kicked under Miss Hussey's desk. It had been T for trouble. Walking home that day, Calder and Petra saw Miss Hussey cross Harper Avenue and head toward Powell's. They knew exactly what to do. Hurrying to the corner, they looked both ways. There was no one in sight. She must have gone inside. Maybe we can see something through the front window. Mr. Watch is usually facing the other way. If we walk in the door, she might be right there, Calder said. Petra nodded. They crept under the window and stood up just enough to peek over the display shelves. Miss Hussey and Mr. Watch were talking intently, their heads close together. It was frustrating being so close to them and not being able to hear. Petra and Calder's minds were racing, but in different directions. Calder was going over everything he had seen Mr. Watch ever do that was puzzling. Why did he spend so much time in the art section of the store? It seemed like he was always straightening books over there. And why had he been so friendly to Mrs. Sharp, walking her to the store before Calder started her deliveries? And were he and Miss Hussey friends? Petra was wondering what had made Miss Hussey buy that art book weeks ago, and whether it was just a coincidence. Miss Hussey was very adventuresome. Had she gotten herself in over her head? Had she really just fallen the night before? Did her injuries have anything to do with the missing lady writing? Heading back down their block, Petra and Calder shared their worries. If they had turned around, they would have seen Miss Hussey and Mr. Watch leave the store together. Miss Hussey was carrying a thick package under her arm. The Chicago Tribune editorial board printed this unsigned letter the following morning. This is where it gets good. Dear concerned art lovers, I am the one responsible for the temporary disappearance of a lady writing. She remains in her frame, and no harm will come to her. She will be returned when the lies that surround the life work of Johannes Vermeer have been corrected. I have committed a crime, but in my heart, I know that my theft is a gift. Sometimes bold steps must be taken to uncover the truth. Here lies the problem. The great master known as Johannes Vermeer painted in truth only 26 of the 35 paintings we now attribute to him. These real Vermeers were done between 1656 and 1669. How do I know this? Look for yourselves. His touch is unmistakable. His vision, his originality, impossible to truly reproduce. Now tell me why we have no papers, no printed materials written by this great artist about his life's work. Why do we know so little about the man? I believe that this is the answer. Vermeer's followers, and perhaps even members of his own family, those he taught and those who greatly admire him, got a hold of and destroyed his papers after his death. And then a number of works done under his direction or influence were sold as paintings either executed by an immature Vermeer at the start of his career or by the ailing artist in his last years. Centuries went by and Vermeer fell into obscurity. As the master's works became more and more valuable in the 20th century, those who owned these earlier and later paintings were of course uninterested in the idea that they might be in ownership of a painting done by someone else. These paintings are currently in a number of big and powerful museums, including the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York and the National Gallery in London. Who is now brave enough to correct these errors? Who but the public at large, those with nothing to lose? What should you do? First, you must simply go and look. Look at the reproductions and books about Vermeer. If you cannot get to the museums, ask yourself, after studying the great paintings of genius done by Vermeer during the 1660s, and just before, whether these other works have the same magic, the same luminous glow, the same secretive dreamlike power. Well, do they? The greatest art belongs to the world. Do not be intimidated by the experts. Trust your own instincts. Do not be afraid to go against what you were taught or what you were told to see or believe. Every person, every set of eyes has the right to the truth. These paintings will speak to you as they have to me. When you have looked as you have never looked before, you will come to agree with me, and then the record will be set straight. To do this, you must protest. You must be difficult and impossible to ignore. I hope you will write by the thousands to the museum officials, to newspapers, to those in power. When the surviving life work of this great painter has been correctly identified, only then will I return a lady writing. I eagerly await your involvement. I will be setting up a website where you can post letters on a computerized message board. They will be kept by me and they will be read by the world. As for the 3 people who received a letter from me in October, you know who you are. I cannot thank you enough. The part you have played has been invaluable. I congratulate you on the pursuit of truth. The uproar was instantaneous and dramatic. There you have it. A lady writing, stolen. The man or woman responsible, unapologetic. They think they are going to solve an ancient old crime about art. What do you think?